Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about survival knives under $50. This is going to be a part 2 to a video that I did a couple years ago called Survival Knives Under $50. That video was more focused on light use survival knives, knives that you necessarily don't want to go and process firewood with as your first choice. You don't want to build a shelter with as your first choice. You know, they might not be the best choppers, you know, that type of deal. It's something more of a small platform and really designed for like a day hike type of deal. This video I decided to do is going to be a little bit more focused on hardcore, hard usage survival knives. So with that being said, just keep that in mind, just the disclaimer, there are two videos floating out there that are survival knives under $50 by me. Okay, anyways, the first knife that we're going to talk about is right at that $50 mark when it comes on sale. And it is the Condor Toloza. This features a 1075 high carbon steel, so yes, it is susceptible to rust. So you're not going to necessarily want to have this knife, you don't want to leave it in a wet sheath. You don't want to, after you get it wet, just wipe it down. You know, maybe a little coat of oil might be a good thing for it. But, you know, it is susceptible to rust. So just keep that in mind, and every single blade that we're going to talk about today is susceptible to rust. Okay, with that being said, the Tolosa is made in El Salvador. It is 11.5 inches in overall length. The blade length is 6 inches, but it actually only has a 5.25 usable cutting edge. So, and that's due to the little choil area right here, where you can kind of choke up on the blade and use it like it's a smaller knife, which is a really nice feature to have in a survival knife. You want it to do everything basically, so that's kind of cool. Yeah, so it features a flat grind, and it didn't come very sharp out of the box. I had to retouch up the blade, but you know, I don't mind doing that. I don't mind touching up blades because I would rather get a good quality knife that's not sharp out of the box than get a crappy knife that's sharp out of the box. If that makes any sense. And I sharpen my knives anyways, so it's not that big of an issue for me. So yeah, with that being said, this is a $50 knife, and the features and benefits that I really like about this is the micarta handles. Let's see if you guys can see that. That's a nice canvas micarta. Another thing about it is the fit and finish. There is no gap between the steel and the micarta. It doesn't rise up particularly. It doesn't create so it's just smooth from micarta to steel back to micarta when you touch it. And the reason why that actually makes sense and why you want that in a knife is because it eliminates hot spots. If you have a little ledge or a little gap or something in between, it can cause fatigue and on your hand when you're really using it for chopping or prying or batoning or something like that. So that's why it's really important to have a really smooth area when you're on a knife. Okay, so yeah, that's the Condor Tolosa. The next knife we're going to talk about is the Schrade, the CH F9, and this is kind of a celebrity here on YouTube. There's tons of videos talking about this knife and its capabilities and everything. So I figured it'd be fair to throw it into the mix. This knife retails for about $39.99, and it's made in Taiwan. It features 1095 high carbon steel. The overall length is 12.125 inches. The blade length is 6.375 inches, and the actual blade length is 6 inches exactly. And again, you have a little choil here where you can really choke up on the blade if you need to do smaller cutting and more detailed cutting tasks. So that's one of the nice features that the CH F9 has, and it's $10 cheaper than the Tolosa. Okay. Oh, I forgot to mention the grind. The grind is actually a hollow grind on the CHF9. What you're going to see and what the main differences are from the Tolosa and the CHF9 is mostly the handle material and a little bit of the fit and finish. The Tolosa has a micarta handle. The CHF9 has what's called a thermoplastic handle. And what the thermoplastic is a fancy way of saying rubber. It's a rubberized type of handle. The thing is, when you're talking about micarta, when it gets wet, it tends to be grippy. Rubber, when it gets wet, it tends to be slippery. So that's something to keep in mind, and why a lot of the higher end knives have micarta versus rubber. Okay. Another thing is a fit and finish. I showed you before. There's no real gaps in the handle on the Tolosa. The CHF9, not so much. Let's see if I can get a good shot of that. There are hot spots on the blade where the handle is a little bit... Okay, so see all that that's kind of like catching the light right now? In this area? That's all hot spot. And there's some more in the at the end of the knife up here. It's just kind of hard to catch on camera. But what these hot spots do, see, there you go again. You can kind of see it. It's all the stuff that's kind of shining in the camera in that area and up top here. What that does, though, is it creates hot spots in the blade when you're actually using it to baton or using it to you're choking down on the handle to use it in chopping, that type of stuff. And what's the answer for it? Use gloves. That's what I did. I ended up using gloves with this, and it was fine. You know, the hot spots didn't bother me as much when I was wearing gloves, but it did a little bit when I wasn't wearing them. So yeah, that's just something to think about. Okay, now the next knife we're going to talk about is from New Zealand. It is called the Svord Kiwi Pig Sticker. This is a Swedish steel, and the steel that's used is high carbon. It's a Swedish steel, but the really cool thing about this knife is that it's hand ground, and it's convexed. So this is the only knife that actually has a convex grind in the whole group, and I'm a big fan of the convex. I think it's an excellent knife or excellent edge for cutting. With that being said, this knife retails for $34.99. It's 12.5 inches in overall length, and the blade length is 6 3/4 of an inch long. So, okay, that just gives you an idea. So it's 3.75 or 6.75 inches long. So it's the longest blade length of any of the knives we're looking at today. This retails for $34.99, and where you can kind of tell the difference between the knives is the handles. We had thermoplastic, we have plastic, we have thermoplastic, and then we had micarta. So that's a big difference. So for $34.99, you're really paying for the steel, and you're paying for a hand ground knife. And these things are really good. This knife I found it's not super thin. I mean, it's not super thick, so you're not going to be getting too much chopping ability out of it. But what you are going to get with that convex edge is you're going to get an incredible cutter. So this thing is going to cut through lashing, it's going to cut through rope, scrape the limbs off of bark really easily. And I found that that's what this knife was really excelled at, is just cutting and scraping, not so much, and even batoning. It did surprisingly well for being such a thin blade at batoning. The steel is amazing on these things, and I think for $34.99, you really can't go wrong with picking up one of these Swords from New Zealand. All right, now let's talk sheaths. Or, let's talk ergonomics. One thing that you'll notice on both the Schrade and the Sword is it's got a little protrusion on the bottom on both of these right here. And what that allows you to do is you can choke down on the handle and use that to get more leverage for chopping. And you can do that on both of these knives. My biggest complaint with the Tolosa though is that you can't really, it doesn't give you a nub to make it so comfortable to chop, to really choke down on. So chopping was a little bit harder with the Tolosa versus any of the other knives. Let's talk sheaths. Svord comes with a really nice leather sheath. It's meant to ride really deep into the pocket, so you get really good retention on the blade, and it's got a belt loop. You know, it's a pretty nice sheath. You know, considering the knife's only $34.99. The Schrade, the CH F9, comes with a nylon sheath, and it has a spot for a sharpening stone or a survival tin, that type of deal. And you know, it works, and it works well. But the Tolosa, there's a reason that I showed you the other knives with a inside the sheath. Now the Tolosa, I put a heat gun into the plastic in here to try and open it up, and there's a stud or something stuck in there, and I can't even use the Condor sheath, so it's useless. So dings for that. All right, with that being said, I went and I spent 4 days out in the wilderness a couple weeks ago with these knives, and I was really trying to see what they're good at, what they're not good at, and really try and pick one knife that would be the knife that if I had to take, if you gave me a $50 bill and I only could take one knife into the forest with me, and you told me to go live for a week or 2 weeks, and I could only buy one knife with that $50 bill, which one would I buy? And the knife that I end up choosing, sorry, CH F9. I didn't think it would do so hot because of that belly that it has. It's got this weird kind of fighting knife shape to it that I don't think lends itself well to survival. I didn't think would lend itself well to survival use. But due to the weight difference between that and the Tolosa, you're talking the Tolosa comes in at 12.4 ounces, and the Schrade, the CH F9, comes at 15.9. So you're talking almost a pound. With that much weight behind it, it makes splitting easy. It makes chopping easy due to that extra weight. So that's the reason why I picked this. Now, the Tolosa is not a bad knife. The Tolosa is actually a really cool knife. I just did not like the profile on the blade so much. I found there was a jack of all trades, but a master at none. It wasn't the best at scraping. It wasn't the best at splitting. It wasn't the best at batoning, you know, but it was good. And I think the Tolosa would actually be a really good knife for somebody that wants to get into the hobby of knives and wants to learn how to reprofile a blade. Like if you convex this thing, I think it would be awesome. And I have plans on convexing the blade. But just from the cost from the factory from Condor, I don't know if they'd be able to do that and convex the blades, or if it's just easier for them to do a full flat grind from cost perspective. And I think it's a little bit of a cost issue here. But what you can do is you can reprofile the blade, convex it. You can do, you can actually put, texturing on the micarta. And what I was thinking of doing is chiseling off a piece here in the back where the lanyard hole is to make a chisel so that I can actually hit fire steel with and use it to spark like on the Brothers of Bushcraft knife. But so, you know, with that being said, they're all great knives. The Sword is a killer deal at $34.99. You cannot go wrong with it. You know, they're all good knives in their own right, but I just picked the CH F9 as, you know, the one that I would take. But try them all. They're all good knives. You know, I can't say that enough. All right, thanks guys for listening. Please like and subscribe.